Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from August Burns Red, Death Below, out March 24th on Sharp Tone Records. This album has 12 tracks, 53 minutes in length, and this is the band's 10th full-length studio album. They are an American metalcore band. Now from the start, I feel like you're going to see two common denominators across this entire record. The fact that this album is very heavy, even brutal at times, both musically and vocally, but also the sense of darkness that permeates throughout the entire record. Now, just because the album has these two common denominators that really glue the album together, it doesn't mean that every song is repetitive, or it doesn't mean that every song has the same sort of style or the same sort of approach. This album offers a lot of nuances. It's a very dynamic record, and it has the right order of tracks in order for you to feel those ebb and flows a little bit better. It's an album that defines itself within itself. So if you think about it, each song is a piece of the puzzle. When you put them together in this order, you're able to see the exact picture that the album wants you to see. I enjoy this design, I enjoy this structure. I think it added value to the individual songs, but it definitely added value to the collective experience. As far as the sound is concerned, obviously I already said it, this is a very heavy and aggressive, even brutal at times, sounding album. And just because the album has that heaviness to it, it doesn't mean that the sound is not well defined. The production behind this album allows you to see all the different elements individually and then also understand them in the collective experience. I love that about it. Sometimes you have a heavy album and you start to lose a little bit of a sense of where the boundaries are within the songs and even within portions of certain songs. This album doesn't have that. It's an album that has great quality of sound. The sound sounds extremely crisp, very clear, good production, good mixing, pushing all the qualities of the album into the forefront, allowing them to rise all the way to the top, and then packing the backdrop with a lot of heaviness that pushes that quality into that set forefront. This allows them to create an album that is very brutal, very heavy, but you can still see how organic it is in the emotion that it transmits from it. And that's where that darkness comes in. The darkness comes in from the lyrical content, from the vocal delivery, from the sound itself, from how they are able to tie in heavy portions of sound from drums and guitars together as one, but also melodic portions of guitars coming over the top of that heaviness, allowing both to have separate lanes but working really well with one another. So the darkness, the experience of darkness that this album has, comes from different places. And because it comes from different places, it never becomes predictable, it's never really boring. You're always discovering something different at every single turn. And the sound quality allows you to discover those nuances better, faster, becoming more enjoyable. It's an experience to be had. It's an album that has great sound all around, regardless of how high you are in the scale of heaviness or how low you're dropping in the scale of darkness and melancholy. It's an album that just has strength across all of its parameters. Now within that sound, three elements jump into the forefront: bass, drums, and guitars, as to be expected. The bass on this record is really interesting because I felt like it popped more than some of the previous albums, at least Guardians. This album has a bass tone that it's really impactful, and they allowed it to be impactful in the mix. When you hear the bass pop within the album, within a song, it always has an interesting appearance to it. It's always doing something to your perception of the song, either to enhance the heaviness of the track or to enhance that darkness, that sense of darkness that the song carries. So I love the fact that it has dualities to it, but I also love the fact that it has a presence to it. It's not hidden in the mix, it doesn't disappear throughout the tracks, and the heaviness is not diluting it as far as the impact is concerned. Now the drums also sound great on this record. I felt like they had a lot of substance, they had a lot of depth. They didn't splash too much, they didn't become too thin and perhaps thinning out the heaviness that was needed to have. I don't think you can create an album that has this sort of aggression, that has this sort of intensity, and therefore heaviness that comes with it, without the drums feeling a little bit more compact, feeling a little bit more squeezed in, and you were able to see better the texture that those drums offer, becoming a lot richer in their sound and in what they're giving to the songs individually. Now the guitars are really interesting. The guitars are the lifeline of this album. I wouldn't say that this is a guitar-driven album, because I really feel like this album is about all the different pieces coming together as one, with, like I said, great production behind it, great mixing behind it. But the guitars play an important role as far as the duality of melody and heaviness is concerned. I love how you can hear a song that has this heaviness as far as the roadmap is concerned, and then you see the melody coming in and becoming a little bit of the vehicle that's driving on that roadmap. Sometimes one overshadows the other, and sometimes they alternate roles. Really interesting dynamics, something not new for August Burns Red, but I feel in an album that it's this heavy, perhaps becoming a lot harder to allow the sound to be that well defined and to have that experience that well defined. Then as far as vocals are concerned, there's a lot of guest vocalists on this record. JT Cavey, there's Jesse Leach, there's Spencer Chamberlain. So you're gonna have different aromas, different deliveries, different styles, different tonalities. And I thought that was a nice little addition for an album that has these parameters. To go back to the beginning, when you talk about an album that has two common denominators, darkness and heaviness, those two could really start to cover everything else. They could really be a blanket that covers everything else, and becoming a little bit harder to define the nuances and the ebbs and flows within the album. Having guest vocalists helps define those nuances within the record, and how they place those songs throughout the record also helps define it. So this is a case of having guest vocalists that are not only adding value to the individual songs that they are in, because they bring a different delivery, they bring a different style, they give something that perhaps was missing, but it's also an ability to create better changes as far as your perception of the songs are concerned in the overall construction of the album. So here you're adding guest vocalists that are bringing value to the songs and to the overall design of the record itself. As far as Jake's vocals, he's an incredible vocalist. So he carries the album, he carries the heavy load of the album throughout almost the entirety of the album. So the guest vocalists add those nuances, they add those ebbs and flows, they add that added value to the individual songs and design, but the album wouldn't be able to be what it is without Jake performing in the manner that he does. Once again, great vocalist, perhaps a little bit more pissed off on this album than I've seen before. Definitely a little bit more organic as far as his delivery is concerned. It feels more natural, it feels unrestrained from beginning to end, sometimes even unhinged. That's the experience that I got. And then you see that experience reflected in the lyrical content as well. All around, this is definitely a heavier album than Guardians. Think about Guardians, and this one they turn it all the way to 11. It's also a more balanced record because of that heaviness staying consistent throughout the entire experience. So it's a more cohesive, a more balanced, definitely a heavier album, but it's an album that has still a lot of different attributes that we hadn't seen in Guardians. So it's a step up. It's definitely a step up in terms of volume, in terms of heaviness, in terms of design. I'm not gonna sit here and say that, oh, this is their best album to date. They have 10 records in their discography. They have incredible albums, incredible songs. This is a band that has a very deep discography. All I can say is that if you enjoyed Guardians, if that album was one of your favorite records from the band, and you like the heavier side of the band, then you need to check out this record, because this record, like I said earlier, it's Guardians turned all the way to 11. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with The Cleansing, one of the longest songs on the album, just over the 7-minute mark, but a dark, heavy sounding song. Brutal at times, I would say. A song that it's the second track on the album, and it kind of gives you an idea of exactly what this record it's going to be all about. It gives you an idea of where you're going with it. It's a track that feels very dynamic, that feels like it has that sense of heaviness both musically and vocally, and it works off of those two elements in order to allow you to better understand the path that it's putting forward. Allowing the bass to pop in this song is really interesting as well. It allows the song to be better defined and for the shapes of the song to be better defined. It's a track that has different moments in it. It has two bridges that give you different perceptions. The first time that the song drops, you just feel like, you know, the rug has been pulled under you. The song becomes very melancholic. That sense of darkness changes. It's still there, but it's a different kind of darkness, and the vocals really help that experience. But that sets up the heaviness and power that comes right after. It almost hits you even harder. Then you have the song dropping down again, and then when it drops down, it's almost the end of the road. So then the track builds up a little bit into, you know, a more texture approach, but it's a lot more melodic than it was when it started. It starts with heaviness, it loses steam, it regains that steam, but then the second time around, it's really for the knockout, and then the song starts to really fade into what becomes the song that comes right after. This album is really well interconnected as far as where one song ends and where the next one starts. Next we have Tightrope featuring Jason Richardson. I think you're going to expect one thing: great guitar sound on this song. Exactly. This track has great guitar sound. I love how this song blends the heavier side of the guitar sound with a more melodic, I'd say almost even progressive side of the guitar sound. You can hear both. You can hear both together, driving in different lanes but in parallel with one another. And that really becomes the calling card of the entire track. The vocals help add to the heavier side of the song, while those melodic, I would say even progressive guitar sounds tend to dilute the heaviness ever so slightly, allowing the song to be easier to digest from start to finish. It's two perspectives of one single approach in this track, and I love that. I love the ability that you have to hear the more progressive, the more melodic sound carrying you through with this really heavy underload of drums and guitars, making you feel like you want to fly, you want to be free, but there's something holding you back. This song has a little bit of that ability, and you feel like you're walking a tightrope. You really feel like you're balancing yourself, trying to hold on to your balance so you don't fall from one side of the spectrum into the other side of the spectrum. It's a track that feels very organic vocally from start to finish, and that adds a sense of a natural presence to how the whole track comes about. It feels like almost a song that was recorded live on one take. It just happens to happen in the studio. So I really enjoy the energy that this song puts forward. Deadbolt is one of my favorites. Consistently very heavy, even though the choruses, with the clean vocals, with a more melodic approach, they feel very light. But when you get to the end of this track, you're not really thinking about how hooky melodic those choruses were. They worked, but they work in such a subtle way that they didn't really impact the overall perception of the song. The perception of the song is that this is a heavy, heavy song, musically and even vocally at times, because of the way those verses carry you and the impact that they have. That's what leaves a lasting memory within you. I love Deadbolt because it just feels impactful. It feels exactly what the title of the track is, a deadbolt. Like, you can't break this. There's thickness to it. There's metal in it, and this song is all about that thickness and that metal, with those moments of clarity being the choruses. This is it. August Burns Red, Death Below, out March 24th on Sharptone Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.